Now, a lot of you who haven't done any painting at all, there's some equipment that is extremely useful and very time-saving. Helps save your back a little bit. A lot of this paint is in 5-gallon drums, so it's very heavy to pour back and forth. We take a gas-fired drill motor and put a paint stirrer on it, and that's how we mix up all of our paint. Instead of dumping back and forth to get your paint mixed up nicely, there's a lot of nice technology out here. This one can go anywhere. You don't need electricity to use it. To paint the logo over to Turfgrass Research Center, I used just a small Graco airless. It's electric. It's relatively low cost. I bought it used from a fella, and it does a really nice job. That's a picture of starting to fill in the letters with the base coat of white. Once again, that'll help reflect your color code a little bit better, makes it more even. It's not necessary. I do a lot of logos without the white underneath, and get pretty good results. That paint is diluted. That is basically a field graphic paint. That happens to be from Pioneer Paint Company. There's lots of companies that make paint, but it is a latex-based paint. It has no petroleum distillates in it, and I think they might put a little fertilizer in it. I'm not sure. I dilute it depending on what we're doing. In this case, we diluted it 2 units of water and 1 unit of paint. So it's just kind of a light undercoat. Now, when we come to the color coat, depending on the color, a lot of times we'll go 1-to-1 with the dilution ratio, or 2-to-1, 2 parts water, 1 part paint, depending on what your budget will allow and the result that you're trying to get. Once again, we're just filling in the letters as we go. It's really nice if you have someone on the hose to keep it off of your newly painted surfaces. It won't smear that way. Paint dries relatively quickly because it is latex, but just the gentleman in the red hats keeping the hose off of the newly painted surfaces so we don't smear it or rub it. Here we're pumping the paint out of the unit itself and the hose. In some pictures coming up, you'll see that we have like 30-40 feet of hose, which holds a lot of paint. So we'll pump that back into our tub and then get ready to just run water through it and change out colors. The other nice thing is going from light color to dark. The change out happens pretty nicely. You don't get a lot of color degradation that way. Just by running some water through the hose, it'll flush itself out. It's an airless sprayer, so it's very straightforward. Probably a lot of you have seen them or handled them. Here we're just putting in the color coat. You'll notice that we're not trying very hard to keep the edges clean. We'll go back over this edge with a aerosol can. It's very simple and very basic. There's multiple ways to do this painting. Airless sprayers, rollers, which we'll show you in a minute. So there's more than one way to put a logo on turf. Here for the small detail areas, we're just using aerosol. That's a green for the leaves. Basically, we just use it straight out of the can. It's such a small area that it's not worth mixing up and using bulk paint. This is a picture once the color coat is in. You can see down at kind of the bottom left, we've started to put a 2-color outline to clean up the letter. By putting that white on the outside, it gives it a nice clean edge. And this is, you have to understand, this is also a turf that's mowed at about probably 2.5 inches. It'll look a little fuzzier than when we get in the high-cost fields where you're mowing at 3/4 inch, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. That will have an effect on the appearance of the logo. Once again, that's just lining in white. here was the location before we started, and that's the result. So as you can see, it's very low cost. It's the investment is basically the cost of the paint. That paint kind of runs the gambit in pricing, depending on what quantities you buy it in. It's anywhere from $6 to $15 a gallon. So there is a cost involved, but we think that gives a nice logo for field day, and we enjoy doing that. As I mentioned before, there's some other ways. If you don't have a sprayer, there's other ways to lay logos out. Here over at Fred Beekman Park, during football season, we have a set of criteria, personal criteria. If they're playing for a national championship or if it has national championship ramifications, we'll throw something down just to add spirit around the university campus area. This logo was painted with rollers. It was laid out with the coordinate system, and by the way, guys, it does attract attention. I just threw that slide in there to let you know that a lot of times the media, it's such a mystery and it's kind of fascinating, so they love to come out and cover these things. Television as well. Here's a picture of, obviously it's Michigan Week. We took that Michigan helmet off of internet. We just found it, printed a piece of paper off the internet, and then scanned it in and used the design CAD to lay it out. Gentleman on the right is just using a roller. We're using a 5-gallon bucket of paint. I know athletics. Some of you here probably work for athletics. You might have a technique for doing a little more roller than we do. I prefer to spray myself. There's the end result. I think the quality is just as good that way as with spray. And once again, if you don't have a sprayer, if you can come up with a couple roller covers and a bucket of paint, then you can lay something like that out. Like I've mentioned before, these football logos, we're just going to show you a few football logos. They were all done with the coordinate-based system. None of them were stenciled. The downside is once you get the outline on the turf, then you have to maintain it weekly. This paint will, with mowing and dry temperatures in the fall, will go away rather quickly. Some of the equipment that you would use to spray logos, just wanted to give you some exposure to some of this. This is a Graco line laser. I personally think it's one of the best, if not the best. It's an older model. I know they have a newer one out. You can take your bulk paint and just put the tub right onto the machine, put the lid on it. It's gas fired. You can run it right out to your location and start painting. Purpose of this slide is to show you the wand extension to save your back. What this gentleman does, he takes a small pair of vice grips, he clamps it to his wand extension and makes himself a handle. There you can see it's a lot easier than when I was showing you the Turf Research Center logo where we were bent over spraying. Here you have the opportunity to stand up straight and spray. It's a lot more comfortable. There's the finished result. Basically, it's a two-color design. They'll come back through and outline those letters. I can probably see it. It doesn't show up well on the slide. It was pretty foggy that morning when we put it down. You couldn't see from one end zone to the other. Here's the aerosol machine being used to draw in simple lines. This is a one-game logo that we put down very quickly. Generally takes about 15 minutes, and he just uses his walking aerosol sprayer to put that down, and it yields a pretty nice result. Grandview High School, this is a couple of our turf students. They sent me a piece of artwork email, and we laid out a Bobcat for them. Basically, we used the coordinate system to lay it out, and now we're just filling it basically with white paint. The field wasn't in great shape. I talked them into using white instead of a darker blue color, which we thought would even degrade the turf even more. Some of my photography isn't the best, but this is basically the end result. And the gentleman on the left, Aaron Heilers, I think that was his first logo, and Rodney on the right had done a couple, and they got through that very quickly and got a nice result. The teams get very excited about doing these things. The next slide is once again Grove City High School. When they make the playoffs, they have a tradition that they get a checkerboard end zone. It's a lot of work. It's very costly to do for a whole season. So as an incentive, the booster club and myself, I guess, we tell them if you can make the playoffs, we'll lay the checkerboards down. It's a lot of work for 1 or 2 weeks of play, but it really is helps the spirit of the team. They get very excited. What you see here is a shielding board. It was a very windy day. We're trying to keep these squares as clean as possible. We put the red squares down. Now we're coming back and filling the white squares. The shielding board helps prevent drift. As you can see, it's a very kind of repetitive process. It yields a great result. It really is. It's kind of a nice look. There's one of the end zones completed. Basically, all I did was measure these out, and I went down through the squares with a aerosol can turned sideways to paint a very small line, and I drew out all the squares, and we just filled the boxes. Once again, this is a kind of a picture. You'll notice a slide coming up. This scoreboard's on the right-hand side, and an older design, there's nothing limits you except your creativity. So in a few slides, I'll show you the same logo from a few years prior. Here's their center field decoration. This is their helmet decal, digitized and transferred to the center of the field. This comes right off their helmet decal, which is, it's about 3-4 inches long, and then it remains relatively the same through the course of the season. Just a couple more pictures of the field, and then the other end zone. So once again, this is a Graco line laser. It does a wonderful job of filling squares, and it also has the nozzle is detachable, so your wand you can use for striping fields as well. It's a very versatile piece of equipment. Here's the slide I mentioned to you. Notice the scoreboard's on the other side of the field. That's, I think, year 2000. That year, they wanted something different than just a checkerboard, so we gave them a very simple, very basic GC in the center of it, and that's the end result.